After being released from war service in 1946, Ben returned to Deal and started working with his old man again, taking trippers out into the downs and around the remains of wrecks that were on the Goodwin Sands, and running trips up and down the coast off Deal. Winter time saw him herring and sprat fishing with drift nets and longlining for cod, a hard and arduous task that saw him spend very little time at home, but enough had to be earned to see him and his family through the winter. He wanted a boat of his own and started lobster fishing with Frank Arnold at Kingsdown in Old Frank's Punt. He had heard that Bill Atkins and Bill's brother were selling the motorboat Sunbeam. He had seen this boat on the beach at Kingsdown and understood that working with the holiday camp at Kingsdown could be a paying proposition. Ben had a word with Frank, and eventually they went into a three-way partnership: Colonel Fairview, who ran the Kingsdown camp, Frank Arnold and himself. They started the season, and Jim Atkins worked with them for the first year before emigrating to New Zealand. They had some really good days, but taking the year right through, it wasn't much. The next year Frank and Ben ran the Sunbeam on their own. They did fairly well, but again the season was short, and on many of the days there was nothing doing. He eventually bought the Sunbeam outright and brought her to Deal Beach, where he carried on using her for taking out trippers, but the seasons were getting worse and money wasn't coming in. It cost a lot of money to carry out the border trade rules in order that they could be permitted to take passengers to sea, and with added cost of insurance, this made the tripping business difficult to earn a decent living from. Working from the beach seemed to be a way forward, but as the years passed, Ben started looking further afield for better employment and a regular wage. Tripping parties had become few and far between, and shipping getting stranded on the Goodwin Sands wasn't happening so much. He decided to have another change and took a job working as a labourer on Deal Pier, while it was being constructed during the 1950s, still keeping his boats and his hand in on the beach though. The pier was eventually built and his job came to an end, and once again his livelihood was turned back to the boats and the beach. Ben was a very hard worker and a bit of a slave driver, but he never expected his lads to do something he couldn't do himself. Whether it was shoveling beach, ready for launching, hauling drift nets, or scraping down the boats, he would always lead his crew. He turned to the pier again at the age of 57, when his boat business had started to falter. Some of his loyal boatmen had passed the bar, like Stuart Ambrose and Rowley Rains, and the younger lads having new families were going ashore to seek a steady wage and secure employment. Looking back at his life from 1946 to 1974, he wondered how he managed to earn a living. In 1974, he took the pier attendant's job on the pier and kept just two of his boats. He had struggled hard to get his boats and was hoping the boat business could see him out to a very old age and he could continue to survive throughout the winters. He was eventually left with two boatmen, Dickie Lill, who in 1974 was 67 years old and had got to the stage where he just wanted to go to sea on fine sunny days, and Freddie Marchant, who at the best of times had to have a push and be carried around, but was always there. This made Ben's career on the beach more difficult, so the pier was hopefully a way forward. He always had a dream and never gave up on life, although it was a daunting one at times. He hated working on the pier, and again decided to become a merchant seaman at 60 years old. Somehow he managed to join the Merchant Navy, and for a few years later found himself on a cargo ship on the way to Africa. He returned after almost 6 months and took a job on the Channel ferries for a short period. Returning again to the beach, as he still had his motorboats, Ben continued the ardent task of operating them for angling hire, which now had also become a dwindling trade. He had given his galley Undaunted to the Sea Scouts, hoping that they would be able to maintain it, and with the understanding that at regatta time he could use it in the rescue race. But the time came when her condition got so bad that it seemed as though she had come to the end of her life. This was the second time. The first time was when he came home on leave from the Navy and had to look for her. He found her among the bombed ruins in Middle Street, at the back at what was Gordon Blaine's. She was full of rubble. All the thoughts were broken, and there were a couple of old milk churns looking like long-lost sailors standing in her. He got her back onto the beach and had to replace the top plank and gunwale, and all the thwarts and lots of other work to get her ready for the regatta. A few years later, in the 1960s, when Ben and his wife Betty passed the Sea Scouts hut one day, they decided to have a look at the old galley Undaunted. They found her in a poor condition again. But Ben mentioned that he thought he might be able to do something about getting her back onto the sea. It would take a lot of work, but his wife wanted him to have a go, so Ben asked the Sea Scouts for permission to take her back, and after a long time, word came that he could have her. The lads that helped Ben on the beach, the youngest was called Johnny Betts, who was nicknamed Darky, helped bring her back to his beach plots near the pier. She had been painted about 20 times since he had parted with her. The top two planks and the gunwales were rotten, and the bow was soft right down to the apron. A good number of planks were hopelessly split, and all the footings were missing. Nearly every floor timber was rotten or broken, including a good many side timbers. Every thwart and knee was broken or rotten. The only thing which was to save her and get her afloat again eventually was that the keel was still in good condition and had retained its shape. That was how he found her. Johnny Betts had come to work for him. He helped with launching and helped with the fishing on the tripping boats that were turning out to the Goodwins, which at the time was Ben's bread and butter. In their spare time they worked on the Undaunted. Johnny spent all one summer sanding the paint off the galley. Ben then managed, after much searching, to get hold of some wide lengths of hard red wood. Elm was hard to come by at this time. Now the hand slog begun to rebuild the galley and get her fit for the sea again. It took about 3 years before he got her back onto the water, having taken out the old planking and replacing the stem, steaming and bending in new timbers. Neither of them were good boat builders, but what they learnt about boat building was sheer necessity. It seemed Johnny was a born carpenter and would have made an excellent boat builder if he had taken an apprenticeship. He learned very fast. Eventually the day came for their first launch. The Undaunted once more showed her glory on the sea off Deal on nice days and sat proudly on his plot by the pier, a reminder of the heroic past of the Deal boatmen. Ben had been involved with the North Deal and Warmer lifeboats for many years. Before the outbreak of war he did many practice trips with the old boys and helped in most of the launches if his father was on board. He was involved with the lifeboat at Warmer and started as a crew member under coxswain Freddie Upton. December 1961 saw him take the coxswain's position on the Warmer lifeboat when Freddie Upton retired. His years of service took him on many rescues in terrible conditions, but he continued serving on the lifeboat for almost 21 years and aided the saving of 364 lives, although it's impossible to know exactly how many other lives he saved when attending rescues as a youngster in his old man's boat, and the rescues he did in his later years in his own motorboat, saving swimmers, people trapped under the cliffs, cabin cruisers and their crews aground on the Goodwin Sands, or just going out to look for an overdue fishing boat. He once saved a schooner from the Goodwin Sands by jumping out of his boat, the Carefree, and half swimming and half wading across the sands, taking a tow rope to the vessel. He was a holder of 2 vellums awarded by the RNLI for the part he played in rescuing the crews of the Sylvia Oronato and the Argon, which broke up on the Goodwin Sands. After resigning from his coxswain's job, Ben continued to serve on the lifeboat and continued as a crew member under coxswain Harry Brown. His rescue work never ceased. Even after he resigned from the lifeboat service, he was still put into sea to aid some poor soul in distress, or help a ship with its needs. The task was never ending. He always looked to the future and never forgot his heritage, or the ideals by which the Deal boatmen were raised. He was single-minded and at times very stubborn in standing for the rights of the boatmen. He resented official interference of boatmen's historical way of earning a living. In 1948, Ben complained about the council's plans to charge the boatmen for beach plots, and in the 1970s he was found a member of the Inshore Fishermen's Association. His history could take hundreds of pages to converse. His wartime exploits, his races in the galley Undaunted, his work in the 1953 floods, and the record catcher herrings that sank his boat. the exciting and tragic rescues and adventurous times afloat, a great character and well-known boatman that has left an impressive mark on the beach and the history of Deal. Sadly, Ben passed the bar on the 23rd of July 1989. His boats were now stationed opposite the Queen's Flats, where the old Queen's Hotel used to stand. The boat race had been revived for the first time in years. He was excitedly getting the Lady Irene ready for the race, and was chatting to a policeman at the time when he suddenly fell to the beach. He had suffered a massive heart attack. The policeman tried to revive him, but Ben had died instantly. A peaceful wait across the bar, one which he would have dreamed of, on the beach with his boats and the sea churning away in the distance. Ben was just 71 years old. He had a very expansive career and has set a mark on the town of Deal and its history of the seafaring community, the kind of old boatman, like many more, that will never grace the shores of Deal again. Ben has his own webpage on my website containing many of his pictures, which were donated by his daughter Coral Bailey, along with many of his accounts and stories which he personally wrote down. Hopefully Ben Bailey will now go down in history and not be forgotten.